and on the go if you want us there. If you're not one of the 32 million homes we broadcast right into, or even if you are and you just want to watch us when you want to watch us, you can go to ytaclub.com. That's ytaclub.com, standing for U2 America Club, ytaclub.com, and enter Gina is your word that will get you. I think it gets you still, like, your first month's free. So there you go. Don't say we didn't give you any free stuff. Now that Hillary's out of the picture, somebody's got to give you free stuff. All right, let's get back to the trending topics. Thugs in Chicago have taken hate to a new level, and they broadcast their crime on Facebook Live. They were seen brutalizing a special needs man who was tied up and beaten while his captors yelled F Donald Trump and F white people, among other things. They even forced their victim to drink from a toilet. We have the video, and I want to warn you, there's graphic language and content in this video, so please be aware. Here's part of that video that went viral on Facebook, which is astonishing to me that people weren't reporting it. It wasn't torn down far before that, but anyway, here it is.
No, watch out, bro. Watch out.
Yo, bro, great.
Cut it off.
Why y'all?
No, I got my blood on this shit, bro. Hey, cut this off. I'm gonna make your ass walk on butt ass. What's going on, nigga?
Fuck.
Man, I need to get drunk.
This bitch ass nigga right here.
Yeah.
Bitch ass nigga.
Yeah, bitch ass nigga, boy. Donald Trump, nigga. Fuck white people, boy.
No, bitch. Goof. Go.
Now, after public outrage on social media, Chicago officials now say they will charge the thugs with a hate crime. Here to discuss, criminal defense attorney Ally Keegan. Ally, thank you so much for coming in studio with us. First thing, I want to know if any more details have been exposed. Do we know, first of all, how they knew him? Because I understand they targeted this young man who did have special needs. As a mother of a child with special needs, this is particularly offensive to me. They targeted him. This was a chosen victim, correct?
Right. It's starting to look like one of the victims or one of the assailants, because three of them were 18 years old, and the victim was also 18 years old. And it's beginning to look like one of them actually knew him from school. Previously. Yes.
How did he get away? Because I bet he thought he was going to die right there.
The last I heard was that the cops had actually been alerted to the fact that he had been kidnapped because a downstairs neighbor actually heard the commotion upstairs and eventually got sick of it and called the cops. So that's when they let him go.
Thank God. And to think that this was broadcasting live on Facebook the whole time, and people were watching, and no one was calling the police. Your specialty, though, is law, so I'll get away from the psychology for a minute, even though it's hard for me, because that's my draw. But I think it is important that at first they were saying this was maybe just going to be an assault, that there was no hate involved here, there was no evil here. In fact, I heard major news networks today reporting there was nothing really heinous here. This looked pretty heinous to me.
Right, and I think it's one of those things where people start tossing around possible charges before reviewing the footage for themselves. So the crime is the same regardless, but it's what was said during the commission of the crime. While they were beating this young man, while they were doing everything else, it's what they were saying that then pointed the finger to a hate crime.
So the racial references were important. How much does it matter that he is a young man with special needs? Is that considered part of the allegations of hate?
You know, it depends on what the prosecutor decides to allege.
So that's not always considered a hate crime. If someone picks on my son, for example, that's not always considered a hate crime just because he has special needs.
It absolutely could be. California and Illinois law, where this occurred, both have different social groups that qualify for a hate crime. Race is one of them, sexual orientation is another, and mental disabilities is a third, and one among many. So this could be a motivating factor for it. But the key word there is a motivating factor. If I were to kidnap someone and begin assaulting them, and then you just happen to start saying racial slurs, there's nothing okay about that. But if it wasn't a motivating factor in committing the crime, then it wouldn't be a hate crime. It has to be a motivating factor.
Okay. And the political really doesn't matter at all. Under the law, the political part of this is just blah, blah. But you wonder if it would matter more in the court of public opinion, perhaps, if for example, they were talking about Barack Obama, who happens to be a black president, rather than Donald Trump, who happens to be a white president. We're really just coming to terms with some of these racial issues in our culture right now.
Right, and you raised two interesting points there. The first was that if it's a political issue, you had mentioned they were saying F Donald Trump. If it was sheerly politics that motivated this, then it technically wouldn't be a hate crime. Now, that's up for a jury to decide, or if these individuals want to take a plea deal, then that's up to them too. But if this were sheerly political and politically motivated, then it wouldn't be a hate crime. But like you mentioned, in the court of public opinion, these individuals might need to get out of Chicago now for a trial if it comes to that, because their criminal defense attorneys, like us, will need to argue that they can't get a fair shake in Chicago now, so they might need to go elsewhere.
A lot of really bad things happened to this young man. His head was cut. You saw the foot on his head. They made him drink out of a toilet. I'm sure, you know, if PTSD can happen to somebody in this situation, for sure, he probably will at least have nightmares from what happened to him. I can imagine. So quite traumatic, and also depending on his IQ, could be even more traumatic just based on that. So what crimes are we talking about, and what's a realistic expectation of time that 3 18-year-olds are really going to spend in jail?
Well, it depends. The law, as far as punishment goes, it does vary state by state, and this is going to be
So it
prosecuted.
depends on where the jurisdiction ends up.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And in Illinois, the crimes that they're being charged with, including a hate crime, because that's its own crime in and of itself, they're also being charged with aggravated battery, which would be the normal harmful or offensive touching, but with great bodily injury, which looks pretty indisputable here, as well as aggravated kidnapping, which involves taking someone and confining them. But the aggravated part is when you are doing it, holding them for ransom, or you're doing it to an individual with, they call it an intellectual disability, which would apply here.
Does it matter legally that if it is the situation that the neighbor called the police, and we don't know all the details, I guess, yet, but the neighbor called the police and the police intervened, because we don't know how this would have ended. He could have ended up dead. Will that be taken into consideration in court or not?
Of course it will. And even when it's hard for attorneys in general, because even when something shouldn't be considered, you can't take something out of the mind of a juror. So the intangibles there will always count. But especially here, because the police didn't go to the apartment or the home and find him. They just released him after the neighbors called the police.
Oh, I see.
The police found him wandering on the street afterwards.
Okay, well, it's going to be interesting. We'll look for this to unfold. And we'll hope that there are no copycat crimes, right, Ally? Thank you so much for being with us. Up next, we find out what will happen when Obamacare is repealed. Will people be dying in the streets? Dale Bellis from Liberty Health Share is going to tell us why.
Typically, cleaning is not something that you